Hi, everybody. This is Deanna Kosaraju at Global Tech Women, and I hope you're enjoying the Voices Conference version 3.0. This is the third year of our annual conference for women in technology around the world, held the week of International Women's Day. And so I'm really excited about this next talk. It's really about the first ever global survey to hear voice, value, and vision in today's young women. And Jin In has been doing amazing work at the 4Girls GLocal Leadership, and she will talk more about that. A couple of housekeeping tips here. We will be using the chat window over on the right-hand side to ask any questions or make any comments. So we're going to be doing some work here where we will be asking for feedback, so that I hope you will leverage that chat window. Also, we have a PowerPoint deck, and when I launch that PowerPoint deck, you can drag it and drop it anywhere on the screen, so you can watch our presenter, you can follow along with the PowerPoint and use the chat window. You will need to advance your own slides, and you'll see when I put up the PowerPoint, there's little arrows going left and right so that you can advance the slides. And our speaker will let us know what slide she's on, so that way we can follow along with her. So with that, Jin, I'm going to go ahead and load your PowerPoint slide here. And everyone should be able to see it now. So you can drag and drop it anywhere you'd like. And as you see, there's 26 slides. So you can just use the right arrow there to advance the slides. And with that, I'll hand it over to you and we can get started.
Thank you, Deanna. So I want to welcome everyone. It's very exciting. I have spoken via live stream several times, but I've never done an interactive live conversation and presentation. So I am learning with you, believe it or not. And in fact, the technology world is not the world that I am all that familiar with. So the conference, of voices and women, I am confident, but in the technology, I am on the journey with you. So I want to talk about something, and I'm going to present on what I truly believe is the most powerful tool for change. And it is a word that I think a lot of organizations use and a lot of movements have used. And in fact, I use it in the work that I do. But I want to really question and challenge us. What does it really mean? So the word is empowerment. And on the program, I intentionally spelled it IN empowerment, INpowerment. So INPOWERMENT. But for the sake of the word and the way that we usually see it, here it's spelled out empowerment. And this is a quote from Secretary General Kofi Annan, and he said, "There is no tool for development more effective than the empowerment of women." So this is, he doesn't have to say it. I think it's for all of us. We know this, and most of the people, I think, that is attending this conference and that's watching will probably also believe it as well. And in my work and my space, in fact, it is one of the two focus, and so it's in the gender equality and women's empowerment work. And so for me, I've done this work my whole life. And in fact, I started when I was very young, at the age of 8. That's when I moved to the United States, and I started working in my community, and I didn't know that it was working for women and girls. I was just doing the work that needed to be done. And it is probably not surprising to all of us in the United States. It's also work in women and girls. And in fact, I quickly learned, so this space that's called gender equality and women's empowerment. So I started to really think about what is empowerment and what do we really know about empowerment? If this is such a powerful tool, and in fact, now today, many world leaders and institutions have come out very clearly and affirmatively that it is critical to every single global challenge that we are facing today. And in fact, sustainable development and some of these other lofty words that we use, that it is really the solution, but so I wanted to know, what do we really know about it? And at the global level, some of the monitoring tools, and in fact, the Millennium Development Goal was one of the first that really looked at gender equality and women's empowerment and started to monitor and measure women's or gender equality and women's empowerment around the world. So knowing that, I really looked at all of Millennium Development Goals, but specifically Millennium Development Goal number 3, which was created in 2000, right at the change of the millennium. And this goal specifically states it's to promote gender equality and empower women. And here are the 4 indicators. And in fact, this is the updated version, because when I presented this last year, around this time of the year, on International Women's Day and Women's History Month, I realized that there was actually 3 indicators. So it's interesting how even these indicators are evolving. But now the Millennium Development Goals track 4 areas or 4 indicators, and that is education, especially girls to boys, and it's in primary, secondary, and tertiary education. It also tracks the ratio of literacy of women to men. And then it also tracks the share of women's wages in the non-agricultural sector, employment sector, that is. And then they also track the portion of national parliament seats that are held by women. Now, these are, as you can see, a comparison of how many girls to boys, or how many of women to men. So really, for me, these are indicators for the gender equality portion. And I began to really think about, well, what here are we really tracking and monitoring the empowerment of women? So I looked at another indicator and another report that measures and assess the gender equality and women's empowerment, and that is the World Economic Forum. And in fact, they come out with a global gender gap report. And here they're looking at 4 areas: education, health, economic participation, and political empowerment of women. Now, what's really interesting is that, as you can see, one of the indicators even says empowerment. But here is their note. At the beginning of their report, they actually state very clearly that they are ranking countries, and in fact, today it's about 136 countries that are on board that they measure. And they specifically note that it is in proximity to gender equality, not women's empowerment. So they tell us that they are not tracking, or they're not monitoring or measuring the empowerment of women. Even when they say political empowerment or use one of the indicators is actually an empowerment. So then, for me, this was very critical, because really what is happening today, and for me, it is a moral obligation. It is also very intimately connected to my own life story. And that is really what's happening around the world. And economists, they launched this report, and it was on the front cover, and it was called Gendercide. And in fact, I saw a talk by Secretary Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State at that time, and she said she thought this word was misspelled. She actually thought it was genocide when she was first seeing it, and then realized that it was actually talking about gendercide. And that is how worldwide girls are being killed, and for no apparent reason or for no fault of their own, but specifically because they have 2 X chromosomes. So why is this such a huge global problem? And today, why is it intimately connected with every single global challenge that we are facing today? And I'm talking about even things that have what for most people may think it's not even a women's issue. And we'll talk more about that later. But number-wise, what does this mean? And that is that if you tallied up the girls who've been killed, aborted, or neglected to die, the total number of people that have been killed from all of the genocide of the 20th century it's still less than the girls that we've killed. And so to put it in another way, if we also counted the number of people who've died in all the wars of the 20th century, it still is less than the number of girls we have killed, simply because they were born or they had two X chromosomes. Many of them weren't even ever born. So this truly is the moral obligation of our time. And although for me, I saw this as a really a mission and a passion for me. I needed to prove this to people, why this was such a problem. So then I started to research and investigate more of, okay, so what number-wise, what does this mean? To show people, because data is very powerful. If you just looked at the top 3 genocides of the 20th century, and you can Google this, you can actually even look at genocide reports, and these are rough estimates. So the Japanese War killed about 10 million people. What they call the Soviet famine, which also includes the famine that happened in the Ukraine, is about 8 million people. The Holocaust, which many people say is one of the worst genocide ever, killed 6 million people. But as you can see, even if you just added the top 3, it comes still no close to the number of girls who've been killed, which is actually 100 million girls around the world. And that is just counted. So how many, how do we know how many that have not been counted? And in fact, what's really stark, if you wanted to put this in a very personal note, is I recently heard former President Jimmy Carter speak about this issue, and he talks about the Holocaust, that it did kill one of the worst genocide in history, killed 6 million people around the world, Jewish people, and as you can see from the numbers, that 16 times that has happened to girls. And what is really remarkable is this happened by their own parents. So that is the family members chose to kill or abort or neglect them, and they died. So this is such a deep personal issue. It is certainly a societal problem, but really now, of course, it's become a global problem, and we'll see why. Because even if you didn't care about girls, or even women for all that matter, here's why it's becoming such a huge problem for the private sector, for nations, and in fact, for our own safety. And that is because today we have the largest number of people on this planet. And likewise, we have the largest number of young people on the planet. We have over 1.2 billion, and I'm sure that's actually even more than that now, because that was the last figures of last year. But what's really, really stark about this figure is that not only do we just have a lot of people, but we have a lot of young people, but specifically in developing countries. In fact, 90% of young people today live in developing countries. And so what does that look like? In the Middle East, it's more than 60%. In South Asia, it's more than 2/3 of their population. And in Africa, it's about 70% of their population. So you're talking about a really large number of young people. So you can imagine, from the woman perspective, what is happening here. One, there's a lot of issues going on with gender imbalance and power imbalance. But really, young women, if we continue to not value them and they don't have choices in their own life, they will only have more children, because population control, or how many children they get to have, is not their own choice. So this population explosion will only exacerbate. But let's say you even don't care about, let's say you don't care about girls, you don't care about women, and you don't even care about the population explosion because you live in the developed countries, or you live in a developed country, and people that are poor is just not your priority. But here is where I have seen people's, at least their minds change. And that is because today, unfortunately, sadly, violence and extremism has become global. So the world that I never ever in my entire life imagined that I would be working with is the terrorism world. And in fact, I work on women, peace, and security. It's a national action plan that is a UN Security Council resolution. And then our President Obama, signed it also and joined in 2010. And I am part of the group that helps US government really put this national action plan to implementation. And so what has really become obvious to me is that, and I love this quote, it's by Albert Einstein, and he said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And I love this slide because it reminds, it really, it's true to every part of life. And that is that we do just, as human beings, we tend to just do the same thing, thinking, oh, well, it'll produce different results. But definitely in the field of women and girls, this issue isn't new. And for people who've been in this field their whole life, I couldn't help but to wonder, why aren't we making bigger strides? Why aren't we making, and the International Women's Day and Women's History Month is an amazing time for all of us, I'm sure. But definitely for me, it is a tremendous, well, I also feel that there isn't enough time in the day, but it's a tremendous time for mobilizing women and women gathering, especially at the UN. Currently, the Commission on Status of Women is going on. So there's this great momentum, but I can't help but to think, why have we not progressed? And in fact, I call it leapfrog. Why haven't we leapfrogged this issue, if this issue really is older than God? So, and next slide, Deanna is actually advancing the slides, or reminding you about the advancement of slide, and me being new to this, I'm now cluing in on this. Thanks, Deanna. So next slide, we are now on slide 12. And this slide says, so what really is empowerment? So we have done, and from my assessment, we monitoring and evaluating, and also just assessing how many girls versus boys going to school, and how many girls versus boys are getting jobs, and even women in parliament. But really that question of the second part, which is women's empowerment, I really needed to know more what this was about, and specifically women's empowerment. Because if we are actually saying this, that empowering women is the most powerful tool for sustainable development and transformation, and especially if you're in the corporate sector, we are now showing that having more women in boardrooms and more women in business is actually good for business. So if that's the case, is it just about numbers, just having more women? Or is there even another tool that is even more powerful to make that case, and for us, a solid case, not only in the private sector, but really for social, political, and economic transformation? And so let me show you one slide, and this one, so it's now we're on slide 13. And this one shows this, we call this the girl effect. And in fact, this is a report that was launched by the World Bank and the Nike Foundation. And it just shows simply in 5 countries that if you invest in adolescent girls, specifically adolescent girls, what the economic output would be. And here, which may be very small for you, but I can just tell you because I know this slide and I worked on it also as well, with Nike Foundation and UN Foundation way back when we were a coalition of organizations and people who were really advocating on behalf of girls around the world. This is just in 5 countries. And it shows that if you invest in girls in areas, and here it's all economic or health or education, how much each nation would actually gain in their GDP. So, and if you tally, in one country it's 383 million, in another country it's 22, I'm sorry, that's actually billion, so 383 billion, 22 billion. So if you add all of these, the countries, there's 5 of them, this is nearly $500 billion into the global economy. $500 billion into the global economy. 5 countries, $500 billion. So this is why now many world leaders and large institutions, government institutions, as well as intergovernmental institutions like the World Bank, they are also championing girls, and they realize that not only is this a moral obligation, but my goodness, economically, they are truly a powerful force for change. But sadly, we know that that isn't the case around the world. In fact, I presented earlier that 100 million girls are killed even before they even get a chance for life. So realizing that Einstein's quote, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, I realized that the solution, another Einstein quote, and that is that the solution to a problem will never be at the level of, solution to a problem will never be at the level of the problem. And so out of the need for really elevating what this work is about, and that it isn't just about getting girls to school and getting education and getting health care for girls, although all of that is necessary, I started an organization called 4GGL, for Girls GLocal Leadership, and that's the next slide. We are now on slide 14. Slide 13 was the economic indicator and the power of girls, and slide 14 is the description about 4GGL. And really, 4GGL, the mission, is to take action to develop the next generation of empowered female leaders who really, I have no doubt, will transform our world. And my beginning, or my mission for the beginning, was to just go to small communities or local, and work with local organizations to really help them not only tackle their issue, because every country, every nation, every society has a problem or some issue they're working on. In India, it may be child marriage or violence against girls. In the United States, it may be violence and sexual harassment. In Africa, or specifically in sub-Saharan Africa, it might be HIV/AIDS or female genital mutilation. You see how there was so many issues, and there was no way that I could possibly tackle every issue. But what I really saw fundamentally at the core of all of this is that we really needed to develop girl leaders. Because here's the unique, or what I didn't even realize was innovative, but for me, the conversation changer or the game changer, and that is, instead of seeing girls as all these issues, we needed to see girls as leaders. Because if we saw them as leaders, we would invest in them, we would value them, we would help them to reach their full potential. So that was my mission initially, to go to these communities and work with them. And and so many organizations were serving girls around the world, and they were working, of course, on the issue. So finding organizations that work with girls was never a problem, and in fact, it was quite easy. That was the easy part. And having the experience that I've had, I've worked with U.S. government prior to this. I've worked with all the girls in the United States, or I've represented all the girls in the United States, and then 10 million girls worldwide, and to really see amazing, remarkable transformation. That if we created programs that really help them to become leaders, you would see girls really champion for themselves and reach amazing potential that I can't even begin to, I didn't imagine it, but they will reach it. So if I've had the experience of working with girls, not only in the United States, but in places like Pakistan and Bangladesh and Nepal. This is slide 16. So slide 15 was a girl that I worked with in the United States. She ended up winning the Boston Marathon, Chicago Marathon, London Marathon, as well as the New York City Marathon in 2004. And this year, I actually saw her also win the New York City Marathon as well, and the Boston Marathon. So, and then slide 16 is a young woman that I worked with in Pakistan, and she also, again, exceeded something, and have done work in something I never imagined. She created the first Young Women's Leadership Summit in Pakistan. And what was really interesting about her story is that she didn't even realize what the word leadership meant, because the word women and leaders, she said, didn't even exist in her society. And then then Pakistan experienced one of the worst floods ever. That's slide 17. And it shows that a horrific tsunami flood that happened in their country, and it impacted nearly 10 million people, or 10 million of their citizens. So she worked on this. She saw, actually, through her action, how she is able to be an agent of change and to really develop and help her own society, and really started to develop her leadership skills. And then after that, she created the first ever Young Women's Leadership Summit in Pakistan. And of course, slide 18, this is Malala Yousafzai, who now today she is an icon for girl leaders and the youngest ever to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And so we are now seeing remarkable examples. And, you know, for me, I've seen so many Malalas around the world. And I realized that this was not something that was unique to any of them. That if we really develop programs and help them, because really leadership development, as we all know, all come from experience. It comes from action. It doesn't come from a textbook. It doesn't come from something that, you know, we intuitively just think, oh, I want to be a leader, I want a position. It really comes from taking action, that when we create these experiential opportunities for girls, then they become leaders. But what was also, so next slide. So when I first started this, which is now we're on slide 19, my intention for 4GGL was to take action. I am an actionist, and in fact, I make a note that I'm not an activist, but I'm an actionist, and I just realized that's just who I am. It's part of what I do. But I never imagined when I first started 4GGL that organizations serving near 500,000 girls, they came to me and said, we want to work with you and we want to partner with you. And never did I even imagine that this would really be a movement to transform the fundamental mindset about girls. Because today, too many girls around the world are treated like valueless trash. And I say this very bluntly, because girls are being disposed and killed and obviously neglected to die, as we showed earlier with the gender side numbers. But really, what's amazing is that we needed to see beyond this mindset and seeing really girls as a valuable human being. But more than that, and for me, I truly believe that they are the powerful solution to every single global challenge that we are facing today. So 4GGL has become a social change movement to really champion girls. That it isn't just about issue. We are beyond issue now. We are really talking about looking at girls as leaders, and really the empowered leaders that we know is going to transform this world. So going back to the word empowerment, next slide, which is 20, I started to really think deeply about this, because if this was a powerful tool, then we needed to measure it. How empowered are girls around the world and young women? And I'm a huge fan of the word anything, empower, empathy, because it's my last name. but also because it is that structure within us. So if we're talking about power, it is the power within us. And in fact, what I realize is that this is not some power we have to go buy, or we have to go get from somewhere. It is actually innate in every one of us, including girls. So knowing this, how do I know, or how do we all know who are in this space, how empowered we truly are? And so then using technology, I launched the first ever global survey to really assess, and really this is just the beginning. Now we're on slide 21, just the beginning of what empowerment, or what empowerment is for women and girls. And actually I would say young women, because we didn't want to get to minor. So most of them, even if they did fill out the survey, we were looking at, the critical age we were looking at was 18 to 35. But we didn't turn in anyone down. And in fact, we are still in the assessment or the analyzing phase. And I was really starkly shocked, or not shocked, but surprised, and pleasantly surprised that even young men filled it out. So we launched this survey, and what is so remarkable, so one of the things that I realized that was a critical component of empowerment, and that is our own voice. So we asked the young women, what does it mean for you to have a voice? And you can see here from the picture here just some of the words that popped out when we looked at all the answers. And, you know, to have a voice, and I find the word voice now, I feel like that will be my next research, how people describe voice. And I say this because now I am in that space of extremism and violent extremism and terrorism. And in fact, you know, engaging the White House a couple weeks ago had the first summit on countering violent extremism. And hearing them even talk about authentic voice or credible voice of the Muslim community, and having them speak on behalf of the Muslim society. And, you know, so the word voice is just going around everywhere, kind of like the word empowerment. And, you know, so this is where the next inquiry is coming. But nevertheless, for this project, I am working at empowerment and realizing that one of the key component is voice. So I asked questions about voice. You know, what does it mean to have a voice, and their level of control of the voice. And so here's another question that we asked. This is slide 23. It says, what unleashed your voice? And it shows a picture also of the words that stood out when we looked at their responses. And so when you looked at more specifically, and this is just one of the analysis or one of the questions on slide 24, it says, what is the most important issue to you and young women in your society? And in United States, so this is a global survey, so we had answers from around the world. The ones that I've looked at is the English version. So, and it's people who spoke English or speak English. In United States, here their important societies, their important issue, and the top three were self-esteem and body image, balance, having a career and personal life, and then of course violence. And I put it in violence, but it could be sexual harassment, sexual assault, dating, dating violence, etc., and domestic violence certainly. In the Middle East, some of the main and major issues in their society was again violence and harassment. In China, what was really interesting, the responses were the need to get married. And in India and Pakistan, again, violence. And Nepal, which is really interesting, they, you know, I kept seeing the word domestic servitude and domestic slavery. That's the way that young women were treated, and they feel like that was the most important issue. So, and this global survey, what's really remarkable is that, so we first launched it in English, and then the young women themselves, they came to me, as you can see from, and we got responses from Afghanistan to Zimbabwe. And they said, well, why isn't it translated into certain language? Because if you did that, you would get much more voices. many more voices. And so we did that. We translated into Chinese, French, Spanish, and we also translated into Arabic. And what's really interesting is that out of all of those translation, the most number we got was in Arabic. So that is actually being still translated today. And we have the most in English, but outside of English, Arabic was the second language that we got the most response. So for me, this will be, and the analysis is still going on, and I want to encourage everybody to stay tuned to to 4ggl.org, which is the organization's URL. And at the end of this session, I will have contact information on the slide as well, to stay tuned to our launch of our own survey, the results. And I couldn't help but to really think about that, today is such a remarkable time. I was just at actually Secretary Clinton's launch of her No Ceilings report on Monday. And, and that's also a collection of data of how much progress we've made since Beijing, the World Conference on Women. So it's been 20 years. She's tracking and collecting data. I'm really seeing that, for me, I take action because I don't need to see the data. I know how girls and young women are being treated. But I realize the power of data and gathering data. And it's so interesting to me how we have completely neglected the voice of girls and women, young women around the world. And yet, once you have a captivated audience, and especially this data that I've collected, and that's because they are now coined the term millennials, so that so many institutions and governments are really interested in the data that I've collected. So I'm very excited. I'm very excited to share the full report. It's actually taking much longer than I ever thought because of the translation, and also because this is a qualitative data and not quantitative. I wasn't just interested. I mean, I knew the World Bank and everyone else was collecting how many girls are going to school. I really wanted the qualitative data of how they felt empowered. And we have some critical components that are really assessing their empowerment levels. So now, I wanted to open this to an interactive session and asking you, because I want to ask you the questions that I asked the young women. And so if you have a sheet of paper or you have something that you can write with, I want to ask you the question, empowerment. Because for me, unless you're empowered, you cannot work in the space of empowerment. It's kind of like someone who is working in technology, and not that you have to be completely technology literate and know every aspect of it, but you must have gained some skills in technology to be able to be in that space. So for me, I wondered, how can we talk about empowering women if we are not empowered ourselves? So I'm now then assessing or asking you the same questions. I'd like for you to just jot down briefly how you define empowerment. So I'm going to wait a couple of seconds, and so while you're jotting it down. And my next question to you is that I'd like to ask you, how much control do you have about your own decision making? So the question again is, how much control do you have about your own decision making? And that goes from a spectrum of full control to not that much control to no control, and anywhere in between. And this is a question that we asked in the survey. We'd like to know, what is the most important issue women and girls face in your society? So what's the most important issue that you and women and girls face in your society? So if your population is really women, you can only can only identify your own world and your own society. So based on that, what is the most important issue? Now I'm going to ask you another question, and now we're talking specifically about voice. And the question is what does it mean for you to have a voice? What does voice mean to you? A follow-up to that question would be, do you use it? And if you use it, how? Another question is, who or what encourages you to use your voice? So perhaps it's a person, or perhaps it's something that you've gained. So what or who encourages you to use your voice? And similarly, what or who discourages you to use your voice, if that's the case for you? And the next question is if your level of your voice, if it's changed over time, what caused the change? So if at some point in your life you felt like you didn't have a voice, and then at another point in your life you feel like you had a lot of voice, or you were confident to say whatever you felt like, or maybe even vice versa. You had you felt that you had a lot of control over your voice, and then you didn't at another time. What caused that change? Now, I would like to open it up to see. These are just few of the many questions that we actually asked. Few of the questions, I wouldn't say many, I believe there's about 40 of them that we asked in the survey. And the 40 includes their name and where they live and uh, their language, their mother tongue, as well as other language that they speak. And so it really was not, that labor intensive, because we definitely wanted to collect as many as possible. But we also wanted to ask some specific detail questions of their level of their own control of their bodies, as well as their own voice, being able to voice who they are or voice for issues or advocacy. Um, so now I'd like to open it up to see if there's any questions, or if you have comments about these questions. And actually, I would love to hear the answers to the questions that I just asked, because that really is for me, the opening of some amazing stories. And in fact, I once heard that these surveys or these qualitative data, we call it data with the soul. because every question has a story behind it. And, rather than what grade what's the highest that you went, what's the highest grade you got in education, you only have one answer. But these qualitative data, every question has a story. So I want to open it up to any questions that you might have. And Deanna, how do we get them if there's questions?
I was filling out my questions. So you can either come online, we can try to put you online, or you can just type in the chat window. I love this. This is really great. And I hope that all global tech women will watch this recording and think about what this means to them, because I think we need to look at our definition of empowerment, and see how fortunate we are to have so much control over, a lot of our decision makings, and where we need to fight for more control, and how we can engage in others into the visibility and the voice that everyone should have. So like you were saying to me, how do I feel, or what do I do when I'm empowered? And I really focus on, the visibility, the ability to participate. And how do I leverage that is by helping other women find their voices, and creating a platform like this Voices Conference to give them the opportunity to be visible, to be empowered, to share their ideas, and so we can all learn from them. So I really love this presentation. I think it's an amazing exercise for us all to go through.
Well, thank you. The second to the last slide actually asks, what is empowerment and are you empowered? Those are the two questions that I'm asking each one of us, because I once heard that, we all believe that women are incredible leaders, but they have to be given the opportunity and equal training, as well as opportunities. And I guess for me, I'm seeing women and girls beyond equality. I don't just want it to be about numbers. I want it to really truly be about being the agent of change. And for us to be agents, we need agencies, which are tools. And if that is the case obviously on a societal level, the only way they could measure that is numbers. But at an individual level, that means empowering every one of us. That is the tool. That is the agency tool. So to really look at not only where young women are, which is what this survey has done for young women around the world, but to be quite honest, for myself, and really thinking about how empowered am I truly. And I don't mean just, I say the word voice, and I love the fact that this conference is a Voices conference, and that's why it was a no-brainer to sign up for it. But really the difference between voice and noise. Because today, I think we are thinking that it's voice, but so much of it is noise. And where is the voices coming from? Is it is it coming from those people who have access to technology and internet and etc.? So really helping us really think more deeply about that word empowerment. And again, this is just, I'm hoping, first of many, many surveys, because, just like the Beijing conference on women, and 20 years from now, Secretary Clinton is assessing how much progress have we made. I really do hope this is first of many, many surveys of really assessing how empowered we truly are, especially those who are in the field or going to go into the field of women's empowerment. Because without being empowered, you can't do the practice of empowering. So the last slide is the contact information, which is the slide 26. If there's no questions, I will leave you with, I want to thank you. I want to thank you, Deanna, for putting together this conference, because, it's interesting. When I first saw the technology part, I thought, oh, well, goodness, I'm not an expert. But when I saw the voices or the word, I thought, yes, I can't wait to present. And I really again thought it would be all about this survey to realize, to really think deeply about each and one of us who, and it really doesn't matter if you're in the technology field or the business field or, any other field. Empowerment is the greatest tool for ourselves individually. So if that is the case, each and one of us really need to think about what are those components and are we truly empowered? So thank you.
Thank you. This has been an incredible, thought-provoking talk. I hope that, again, that everyone gets an opportunity to watch this, and we'll connect with you in your leadership role at 4Girls GLocal Leadership. I think it's an important thing for us to do to help others find their voice too. I think that makes us only stronger as individuals and collectively as women.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to reiterate that we will be launching the full report, so that this is kind of a teaser to let everyone know to stay tuned, because we are, again, I was doing just the action. I never thought this would be some sort of a gold mine that I was sitting on. And because of this generation, the millennials, presidential candidates want to know what they're thinking about and what they're valuing. World leaders around the world, of course, want to know what they value and how much control and voice they have in their own lives. And institutions like the World Bank and people who, again, they're just doing their first preliminary survey of their own about women's voices, that they haven't even thought about the younger generation. So again, I never thought that, we were capturing and data collecting on a population who have been neglected for a long time. But now they're also seeing them as an incredible human resource. And of course, what I say all the time is actually they're the most powerful force for really transforming our world.
Completely agree. And we'll let that be the last word. Thank you so much. It was a great talk. And I look forward to seeing all of you on future sessions. We still have more days of great sessions coming. So I hope to see you there, and take advantage of the recordings as well and send them to your friends and colleagues. And with that, I'll say goodbye for now.